Morning, I'm Ryan Arnhouse. I'm chair of the Stratford Historic District Commission and a resident of the Historic District.
I'm Patrick Carlson. I'm with the Connecticut Metropolitan Council of Governments. We're the regional planning agency for the Greater Bridgeport region, which is
Jamie Millward, chairman of Architecture Review Board, Town of Stratford, and town resident.
Mary Dean, Economic Development Director for the Town of Stratford.
Susmita Toja, I'm the town planner for Town of Stratford.
Mike Mitchell, landscape architect with Nicholson Design Associates.
Damien Kalanagi with Kalanagi Company.
Scott Zwilling with Spirit Investment Partners.
Susan Pepper with Blanford Architecture.
Bruce Beinfield with Beinfield Architecture. Bruce Eckerson, Eckerson Design Associates, landscape architects.
Steve Mazzardo, Vice President of Light Associates Contractor.
Max with Spirit Investment Partners.
You record
Chief Technology Officer.
Yeah,
Technology
yeah,
officer.
exactly. That's, apparently,
A lot of
that's
hats.
very key, that's a very key,
Exactly.
role.
I was really brain, just a second, apologies.
No, no
Do you have any
apologies
prelude you'd like to
necessary.
do before we get picked up?
I'm happy to start
Sure.
if we want, and Max.
We're imminently ready, so.
Okay, do you mind if I start?
Please go ahead.
Okay.
Good to go.
Good morning. We thank you for the chance to be here today with you and present our vision of the former center school site. But before we do, we'd like to take a moment and recognize and extend our sincere appreciation for the tremendous hard work, time, energy, and thoughtful diligence the committees, the Economic Development Director, the mayor, and the town agencies have put into Stratford's revitalization efforts, Stratford's TOD strategy, and in particular this RFP. Thank you very much. Today, I have the pleasure of introducing our team and our project, which we call Sutton Place, a proposed 162-unit, purpose-driven TOD apartment community. My name is Damien Kalanagi. I am a managing partner at our 40-year-old family real estate firm, the Kalanagi Company. Our family firm is the proposed co-developer along with Spirit Investment Partners on Sutton Place. Kalanagi was started from very, very humble beginnings. My father, an immigrant from Hungary, and an architect, started our firm from designing and building just one home. And over the years, slowly and methodically, we grew from single-family homes to gated communities, to townhomes, to multi-million-dollar speculative estates, and ultimately investment and co-development in institutional-grade, ground-up multifamily projects from New England all the way down to Florida. Today, we're now a fully integrated company that handles all aspects of design, construction and development under one roof. We're co-general partners and major investors on over $160 million of exceptional ground-up apartment communities. Just last month, we just closed the sale of 341 units of a Class A apartment ground-up deal that we did 6 years ago for $105 million. We're also the owner of the land known as Christchurch property on historic downtown Main Street in Stratford, and we plan to be the developer and owner of that future boutique apartment community, as we call it, the Village. I've also had the pleasure and privilege of working with some of you on the entitlements of that project, so thank you for that. Now, let me introduce our team for Sutton Place. We brought together here an exceptionally talented and creative Connecticut-based team for Sutton Place, capable of executing this project both financially, and a team with extensive multifamily design, development, and operational experience. Many of us here, yeah, I'm perfect. Many of us here are multi-generational Fairfield County residents and have a deep love for Connecticut, and also a deep love for our projects in Connecticut. Scott Zwilling is a good friend and also a former classmate of mine at Columbia University. Scott is the managing partner of Spirit Investment Partners. Scott started Spirit from the ground up and is a very seasoned and successful real estate investor, entrepreneur, operator, and developer of multifamily throughout the eastern half of the US. Spirit has owned and operated over 5,000 rental units and institutional grade multifamily assets in select US markets, Scott will tell you more about Spirit and bring you through the project economics and the financial highlights and model of Sutton Place. The award-winning Fairfield County Byfield Architecture is the lead architect on this project. They're also a partner on Sutton Place. Byfield has significant experience in designing exceptional award-winning TOD projects throughout Fairfield County and beyond. They have designed some of the most significant and respected TOD projects in this area and throughout the Northeast. Byfield understands, respects, and appreciates TOD and how TOD benefits and revitalizes communities. It's a real pleasure to have Byfield as a partner and part of this Sutton Place team. Eckerson Design is an award-winning landscape architectural firm that we've had the pleasure to work with on many times on many exceptional projects together. Bruce's talent and his team's talent is recognized and appreciated all over Fairfield County. Bruce's team will explain our landscape and site concept for outdoor living, sustainability, plantings, green zones, including creating a designated park space for the neighborhood, significant open space, and our plan for streetscape improvements on Sutton Avenue. Steve Nazzardo of Light Associates will be our GC, a partner, and also the construction manager on this project. Steve has significant experience with local commercial, multifamily, and real estate development. Steve will also focus and manage to hire local labor and local material suppliers. We want to deliver good jobs to the area, and especially to Stratford. Steve's local knowledge and construction experience will serve as a tremendous asset to the Sutton Place team. Together, as Team Sutton Place, we plan to create something special, something architecturally lasting, something with purpose for this community and for the neighborhood. And most importantly, something we can all be very proud of. Our objective with Sutton Place was to create great architecture and design with sincere care and sensitivity to the local neighborhood and the local community. Subterranean parking to create more open space and green space, walkability and a priority to non-motorized transportation networks, increasing bike storage and also a bike room. We want to create connections with our residents and throughout the entire community. And understanding smart growth, TOD, and neighborhood revitalization was key. Also, we made an effort to understand the green shift by thinking about the green living concepts with open spaces, designated park space. We talked about streetscape improvements, a resident organic garden, and a proposed dog walk. In phase 2, we also would love to talk about a community arts center. The Sutton Place Community Arts Center is what we call it. And that would foster community interaction and a place for learning and exploring the community arts. Should we be selected, we look forward to immediately working with the town, the mayor, the economic development director, and the adjacent neighbors and the neighborhood groups to have open discussions and potentially modify certain requests. We plan to be part of the Stratford community by owning and operating this long term. We have no intentions of selling this when we finish. We thank you again for all your time, your effort, and your consideration. I will now give the floor to Byfield Architecture to go over our project design and our architecture.
Hi, Bruce Byfield from Byfield Architecture. So one of our goals with Sutton Place was to really try and have a positive impact on the surrounding neighborhood. And the way we went about that was in looking at Sutton Avenue. We thought that if we could restore the single-family fabric of that street to that street, it would be very positive in terms of the character of that street. And so what we're proposing is 4 small single-family homes along Sutton Avenue, with the larger building, the 4-story building, 80 feet back from the road and really hidden by the small homes in the front. We're also seen the fabric of the historic architecture along East Broadway. We opted not to propose any curb cuts along that stretch of the road so that so we're not interrupting any of the historic character on that street. With that introduction, Seal and Baker in our office will take you through the plans.
Max, can we go one back? We'll go to the, one back to the, just to the image. So we have limited time. I'll just go over the highlights and maybe we can handle the detail in Q&A. The metrics of the project, there's 160 units over 4 floors, including the 4 homes that Bruce described at the front of the project. There's approximately 7,000 square foot of internal residential amenity and approximately 25,000 square foot of external courtyard amenity for the building. There are 228 total parking spaces with 198 in a below grade garage and 30 above grade, 22 of which serve the Board of Education. So go to the next one. I think it's on the first floor, please, Max. Yes. So the main 4-story mass. Apologize to shoot the image. Hopefully, it's fine to view. The main 4-story mass is set back about 100 feet. Bruce was pointing out 80 feet. 80 feet is about from this point, almost 100 feet at this point from Sutton Ave, with the 4 homes in the foreground. So that the 4 homes set the tone for the project. They set the scale and the character of the road. It also frames the entrance as you come into the main entrance of the primary building. We have a drop-off. We serve as a ride-share drop-off for people who choose not to have cars, as often happens in a TOD development. So you come into this elegant entrance, you enter the building here, you get into the amenity space, which usually has a leasing office, gym, co-work space, games room. The idea of work from home is becoming much more popular, even before COVID, and now even more so because of COVID. Those type of spaces will be in this large amenity, 7,000 square feet. And you come out here into a courtyard, which is 25,000 square feet, and an excellent residential amenity, which include pools, grills, shared and private spaces for residents to enjoy. Part of the brief that we received from you was to create a green park-like setting. I think we've achieved that. Bruce Eckerson's office is artfully laid out that park-like setting. Bruce will go through that separately. But the amenities not only contained in this area, but flow in and around the building. Go to the next one, please, Max. Sorry, previous one. Go to the garage first. I'll go downstairs.
Sure.
Again, part of the brief was below grade parking. So this is 198 spaces on 3 double-loaded doors, all below grade. That's an extensive build. It was part of the brief, and that's what we want to do.
Can you just point out the entrance?
Yeah, the entrance is on this side. I'm sorry to keep switching around, Max, but if you see it here, you can see the entrance separately coming into the garage from Sutton Ave. These are visitor spaces up here, and there's Board of Education spaces on grade there. As currently conceived, those are the only above grade spaces right now. Again, one of the ideas was to limit the curb cuts on Sutton Ave. Okay. Max, will go to the second floor. So this is a typical residential floor. It has the typical infrastructure of a high-end residential building. You have your stair cores, multiple elevators, a trash chute that's too shaky to point out, that's somewhere there.
It's here, and it's here in these 2 corners.
Right. But we've been doing this for a while. We know what these buildings require and what residents require. This building will be no different. Our office in the last few years has taken particular care in studying how people want to live in apartment units. COVID changed that substantially. We're studying that now, how people interact with their surroundings, what amenities they need in their apartments and outside their apartments. The familiar go-to is the work from home, but it is more than that now. And we're studying that, so we plan to deliver units that serve this community here and by extension Stratford with a product that is current. Max, I think that's just typical flows, and we go to can we go back to the rendering, let's make a few comments about the architecture. So, if some of you are familiar with our previous project in the town, this is similar. The architecture is abstracted New England colonial architecture, simplified. The success of this type of vernacular is in the details. Our office has executed the details well in the past, and as our portfolio will attest to the eave lines, the windows, the details around the windows, the shutters, the gable ends and the proportions of them, the porches and how we detail that and how it flows around the building. We pay attention to that, we get that right, and that will create the vernacular that belongs on the street. It's a residential street. You have these homes at front, the Sutton Ave that reduce the scale, and this is for example, this is the entrance here, with the gable end. We have a porch at the front of that building that both invites you into this new development and scales down the development. That was a major focus, which describes scaling down this Sutton Ave and building up slowly to the mass plan. Thanks. I'll take questions after.
First part.
Yep.
Go back to the site with the shaky. Bruce Eckerson, landscape architect. So, as Seelan had alluded to, our goal was to create kind of a continuous green belt around this development with different spaces dedicated to different uses. So along Sutton Avenue, it was very important to keep that residential scale that exists on the other side of Sutton Avenue, keeping that vernacular, and to that point, the architecture is scaled appropriately. And we've mimicked the sidewalks that are actually set off from the edge of the curb of the street. There's a grass shoulder. We intend to have some street trees that again will start to scale the building and start to reflect what's already on the street. And then the buildings are really surrounded by lawn and other shade trees that will define the spaces, define the views to the entry of the building, and also start to demarcate between the buildings and some of the vehicular access routes that come down each side. We've also dedicated this space of the property over here to more of a public space where we have a continuous sidewalk that wraps around the building, again around to Sutton Avenue. It's a continuation through. We intend to plant a combination of shade trees, flowering trees, and have some benches as well so that people can sit there and enjoy the natural look of things. We also have two places where we've dedicated or intend to have connections, pedestrian connections to the road that bounds the property to the north, and also down through the commercial development to the west, for connections to Main Street and the train station beyond. And we've also created green space all around the building, individual walkway connections to the on-grade units that front Sutton Avenue, and also on the north and the south side as well. And then we've developed this kind of internal amenity space with pool, plantings, some private spaces for the ground floor units that front on the amenity space, places for grills, and potentially using some artificial turf, and a sustainable idea to provide places for cornhole or other type of lawn events. At the west side of the development, we have a dedicated dog run and a community garden. So I can take some questions.
Said before, I'm Steve Mazzardo, Vice President of Light Associates Contracting. We're a family-owned and operated general contracting company in Stratford, based out of Stratford. Recently, in recent years, we've been specializing in apartment buildings, and recently we just completed a 71 unit apartment building on Ferry Boulevard in Stratford. This project was completed on time and on budget and now is currently fully occupied. Stratford has always been a great place to build. We have a great relationship with the town, all the departments, especially building and the fire marshal's office. Currently, we're working on a 56-unit building in Shelton on Howe Ave. At the original timeline of 18 months, we are on track right now to finish that project 4 months ahead of schedule, you know, even with the difficulties with labor and material during COVID. I was introduced by Damien, by my father and his, you know, I also met his father, Alex. We worked together planning and budgeting the Villages, which is the apartment building that Damien mentioned. It planned to come to Main Street in Stratford, and we hope to start that in the very near future. I'm excited at the potential to build Sutton Place. We have an extensive understanding of these types of projects, and we have an experienced local team of subcontractors and suppliers, you know, to bring a high-quality apartment to Stratford. Beinfeld Architecture has created a building that fits seamlessly into the area, especially like the single-family home-style apartments along Sutton Ave. It just shows how sensitive they are to the surrounding community. You know, hopefully from this presentation you get our excitement from, you know, to build Sutton Place or the potential to build it. I'm confident that this project will be an asset to the town of Stratford and help revitalize the downtown area. And this is the project been shown, kind of a time-lapse video from start to finish. Hopefully the site will be a lot easier to build on. It's just a very tight site in Shelton. That's it. Thank you for your time.
Yeah, we'll just, oh, I can't read it. So, our construction time and project timeline, it's hard to read right here.
I can.
Is there any way to make that a little?
And you can turn on the
I
light.
don't
if
have
you
the
need
hard
it.
copy.
Yeah.
I didn't bring it. Sorry, technical difficulty.
No, that's okay, don't worry.
Okay, our, yeah, eyes are going.
You want to, put
No,
on the light.
I can do that. No, this is perfect. This is great. Our business terms and approvals, here with town, we anticipated running around 2 months. And concurrently, there's a couple things that are gonna be going on at the same time. That would be pre-development, which we feel is gonna be about 4 months. And, you know, just finishing up all the rest of our business terms, concurrently within around 6 months. Our local zoning review and approvals, about 4 months. And then within that time, we're also gonna be doing the completion of our design, and that will be 8 months in total, in the total. Financing for our project, we're gonna be running that concurrently as well. That would be about a 4-month time frame. And our permitting of about 2 months. Site prep, we figure is about a 4-month lead. And construction here, once we have the permits, is about 18 months through CO. At that time, you know, during that time, we're also gonna be dealing with marketing, lease up, and stabilization, which is gonna be a 10-month period. I'm gonna bring you now, or I'm gonna give the floor to Scott, so he can give us through our financing for the project and the economics.
So, Scott Zwilling, Spirit Investment Partners. By way of introduction, my in-laws actually live in Stratford, they live in Ormoc Village. So, I have a lot of responsibility here, not to build something that they won't be proud of. So, the project, total cost about $39.8 million, about 240,000 units. You know, within that cost, we've allocated $750,000 for the land. Of that $750,000, we're assuming $500,000 will go directly towards the public park that's been laid out. There's about a little over $500,000 in it says acquisition costs, but really closing costs, title, due diligence, legal, and then our hard costs are about 30.2, about 186,000. Of that, there's about $6.5 million that are allocated to the below grade parking, which is about 40,000 a unit. We anticipate financing this with a combination of debt and equity. The equity is all readily available between the folks here, my firm, Damien's firm, and a few others who are going to invest in the project. On the debt side, we've assumed a 70% construction loan and another 15% in a mezzanine loan. You know, I've listed those separately, but oftentimes they're financed through the same group. It's a stretch senior. There's plenty of groups that provide that financing. The assumptions that go into the financing have all been provided by Jamie Leachman from Jones Lang LaSalle, who specializes in multifamily financing. They've financed over $500 million in projects for our firm. And all the assumptions that go into the construction costs, obviously, the folks here at the table, Steve Bizzardo on the construction, and a lot of the soft costs are based on projects, you know, that we've all done together. Just another thing to point out, of the project costs, we've assumed about 1.1 million is pre-development costs. So that'll be running obviously prior to closing on the construction. Next page. So this is an excerpt from our submission, which has everything laid out, which is why there's footnotes. But basically, we've assumed of the 162 units, the average rental rate is about a little over $2,000 a month, which is about $229 a foot. And that's a weighted average between the studios 1s and 2s. We're assuming that once we lease up and stabilize, the property will produce an NOI of around little over $3 million. That actually stays kind of flat and I'll go to it next, as the real estate taxes start to phase in. So, you see here, this is really just the 10-year pro forma, but, and I'll go into our proposed pilot and our methodology, but, we essentially need that pilot, once the taxes phase in, the full taxes are about $1.7 million. So it's very impactful to the pro forma, which is why we need that time to ramp up. Within the cost here, I mean, this is strictly multifamily. There's some parking revenue. There's some billbacks for utilities. All the assumptions that go into it are pretty market standard. 5% vacancy rate. We've assumed bad debt of about 50 basis points. There is some lease up, time frame. We've offered, we've built in a number of concessions to get to stabilization. And what you see here is, obviously these are construction years. This is the first, partial year of lease up, and then things start to burn off. And really by this year, we're fully stabilized. On the expense end, these are all, again, we've owned and operated projects like this and larger within Fairfield County. So all these are based on real-time information. General administrative, fairly typical. Payroll, we're assuming 4 dedicated employees for the project, 2 who will be dedicated to leasing and 2 who will be dedicated to maintenance. It's a little bit of advertising. Turnover is really just the cost, when someone leaves to refresh the unit and clean and fix stuff, which is why you see really very little in that first year. Just because it's a brand new building, there shouldn't be any real turn costs. Repairs and maintenance, same, as we lease up. And then contract services are really just exterminating, elevator service, fire, life safety, landscaping. On the property management end, we've assumed, a market rate fee of, I think it's 2.75%, utility costs, insurance, and then taxes. Go to the next page. So on the tax end, what we've done is we've actually had 2 different firms help us with the projections on the taxes. And I can go into the methodology if that's something that's useful. But at the end of the day, both firms really came to the same conclusion of how taxes should be assessed. And what we figured out is that fully assess it. This is really. Obviously there's multiple assessment every 5 years. There's a reassessment, but your full taxes or a little over $1 million, within the first couple of years, which grow to almost $1.7 million by the time the pilot burns off. And the goal here was really to create a pilot schedule that, on a net present value, pays for the garage costs. And as I mentioned, the garage costs about $6.5 million. And what we've done here is, we've assumed, no taxes during the construction years or that first year, while we're leasing up, and then taxes will phase in, based on this schedule, 10, 15, 20, pretty much every 5%, but, there's a couple bumps here, that when it's discounted back to today's dollars, that equals roughly the $6.5 million. So, that's what we propose there. So that's it on my end. Thank you. So I think we're ready to take questions. And again, just one more thing to wrap up. Really appreciate the opportunity here. We're very excited about this project, and we think we've accomplished all the goals that you set forth in your RFP, and look forward to hearing your feedback.
Thank you.
So, I have the first question. Please describe the demographic of your target market. Are you looking at, to retain millennials, young professionals, seniors, empty nesters, things like that?
I can handle that.
Yep.
Stratford community, I just knowing my in-laws, I think it's gonna attract, a large segment of demographics. I think you're gonna get some young professionals, which is a growing demographic in Stratford. There's plenty of people, singles, couples, with or without a baby. Generally we find, and now that we have, 4 single-family homes here, single-family rentals are hugely popular, and I think we'll get a number of families that would be interested in that. And then kind of going up from there, there's a number of empty nesters who would want to be close to town and have that walkability. Our firm generally has targeted projects that fall into that 80% of AMI range. So we're not, pursuing the uber luxury, and I think that this project fits this exactly.
Great. Thank you.
Okay, so you went into great detail about this, but can you go into a little more, I suppose, on the amenities that you've chosen to provide here, both for internally for the residents and how you feel that will draw people to your complex, but also a little bit more about the amenities you offer. I think as part of the RFP that we were looking for things that would be attractive to the community as a whole and the surrounding neighborhood. So maybe
I can handle the interior amenities, and then Bruce or Bruce can handle the external. Yeah. So in terms of the internal amenities, there's certain requirements that I think every apartment renter looks for. First thing is we have a dedicated leasing office, which handles the affairs of the building. It's not a large space, but it's prominent in the front part of the building that as people come in, we'll get a number of passerbys who don't have an appointment, and they see the building and they're interested, and they walk through the front door. So there'll be a leasing office, and then within the amenities there'll be a fitness center, a fully serviced fitness center. As Seelan pointed out, there'll be space for dedicated work from home. The goal in every project, there's kind of 2 schools of thought when you put together amenities. You can have a beautiful, I've seen buildings that have beautiful showcase amenities, but are really not, no one uses them. The goal, and I get pleasure personally when I walk through my buildings and see people using the amenities, and that is, that's the most important goal in all of this. It's not just to have pretty things, but things that people really want and use. And I think that's changing a little bit with the work from home space. In the 1980s, it was a racquetball court. We don't build racquetball courts anymore. And then the 90s and 2000s, it was a screening room. We're not doing that anymore. So we're adding community gathering space, because that's important. Within all of the properties, we host community get-togethers at least once a month, and we need a dedicated space to do that. So that'll be comprised of kind of a room, you know, a club room, you know, couches and TVs and maybe a pool table and, you know, just a comfortable room. And there'll be some dedicated workspaces.
I'll just add to that and say that a really important part of what we do as an office and with developers like Scott is placemaking. We try to create places where people feel like this is their home and create communities within the buildings that we build. Important part of doing that is creating spaces in which people can, like Scott says, both work individually, for example, if they work from home, and also be in a community environment. That's got a lot to do with the programming of the spaces, how the people who manage the building create and program those spaces so that they create that sense of community, whether it be, they have names for it, Wine Down Wednesday, communities get together, Fridays they get together for pizza and beer, and so on, but community building is an important part of what we do.
Yeah, I mean, one thing to add, you know, with the community garden, what we've often done at other properties, we'll have a community garden, and then we'll actually have a chef come in, and they'll, you know, teach everyone a cooking class, you know, using some of the stuff grown in the community garden. And it's a really nice event. It's, you know, informative, people love it, but it ties people to the community, you know, and as an owner of apartments, the goal is to have people stay for very long periods of time. You know, we don't love turnover. We like residents to stay, and if they meet other residents within their community and they you know, are tied to that community, then there's a better chance that they'll stay.
And our office has done projects in New Haven and Fairfield and South Norwalk that are all similar scale to this. So we would be glad to give tours of those projects and or provide additional information, because the amenity spaces is something that's really important in terms of community building and the placemaking. And in each of those projects, we ground them all in the within the character of the context of the individual towns. In New Haven, we took an old factory building where they made aircraft during World War II. In that building, they made propellers for the Corsair aircraft that were used during the war. And we learned the story that during that the people who were in the factory making those propellers were primarily women, and then those propellers would be loaded onto the Corsair aircraft that were actually made in Stratford, and then a squadron of women pilots flew those out to Oakland, California, where they were loaded on the aircraft carriers. So throughout that project, there's different ways in which that story is told, so that the people that are living there all feel like they're part of this history. So we look for local stories to embed within our project to make each, you know, to help make each project special.
And on the marketing side, we do exactly the same. I mean, you know, apartments unfortunately can become a bit of a commodity in some markets, but if we're successful, this building will have a personality, it'll have a history, it'll have, even though it's a new build, it'll be tied into the fabric of the community. And so just to answer your question fully, you know, on the outside, and I'll let Bruce Eckerson talk about the public park and all the other amenities, but within the building, you know, above the garage, we have the dedicated outdoor space, and what we found is obviously, you know, post-COVID, outdoor space is hugely important to residents. And it's not always feasible to build large balconies, and, you know, so really this, we felt that this accomplishes it. Besides being a pool, you know, Bruce Eckerson's done a beautiful job with the landscaping and creating a really sense of place, separate, you know, room outdoors, you know, and talk through the amenities. But I think this is going to be a really, you know, great attraction for the residents. So Bruce, you want to?
Sure. So the, as Scott was alluding to, the amenity space between the wings of the building is really the community place, the outdoor place for the residents of the building primarily.
And sorry to interrupt, Bruce,
Sure.
and the public. So this is going to be viewed on the outside as really public park.
Yeah. And I mentioned before, there's a pool, there's a place to relax by the pool. We have places for games, horseshoes, cornhole, things like that. Dedicated places for barbecue and cooking now. Along the western edge, we have the dog park, which could be used as a community dog park. We also have the garden area that Scott alluded to the right here, with the garden shed. And, you know, these spaces, sorry, Bruce, are all connected with, you know, by sidewalks to Sutton Avenue and also down through to Main Street. And then on the left side is really the dedicated public park, again, connected not only to the sidewalks around the building, but to the sidewalk coming up Sutton Avenue. And
There's a connection down here, right?
right, so at the upper left, there's a way to kind of access that road that will bring you down along 95 and underneath the overpass to the train station. And that area is really seen more as a passive recreational space where there's a nice curving pathway going through, you know, flowering and shade trees and things like that, where you can sit and respite and enjoy a little bit of green space.
And I think we also assumed at the top there'd be a playground, is that?
There is a place for a playground, it kind of depends on fire access and things like that.
Bruce, we also highlight, you know, our streetscape improvements that we're gonna be doing over in Sutton Avenue.
Sure. Are there,
And, you know, for,
yeah, so, we're gonna have parallel parking along, Sutton Avenue with some neck outs on either side to kind of, tie those in or kind of nest those in, to the street. We have sidewalk connections, and inside that sidewalk, there's a low, kind of vernacular Connecticut fieldstone wall that, speaks to the larger, you know, regional context of Connecticut. Yep, sorry, Bruce. You know, that follows along.
Yeah, we can make it out of your way.
Yeah, and, you know, at the individual entries to the four single-family houses, there'll be little piers and the sidewalk that would bring you in. So again, very much in the residential character, very low. Again, speaking to kind of grounding the whole development, connecting it to the street and the greater community at large.
and then we also have the access for a future community arts center that ties in.
Correct.
If that, you know, for phase 2, which I think would be
If you go back to the
very
bigger,
important. If we
go back to the bigger plan. Yeah, so the idea is that this main sidewalk that connects all the ground floor units and the main entry, then would transition across the access road down to the Board of Ed parking, down to the future arts center over here. And, you know, we would do something across the bituminous roadway to kind of highlight that that's an important connection from Sutton Place down to the arts center.
Thank you.
Sure, thank you. So you talked about placemaking, and that, I really like the story of what you did with the Corsair factory. Can you describe the inspiration for the approach that you're taking with this piece, with this property? From the architectural
Well,
perspective.
I think that was also much a story for this building itself.
So what we would look to do within this building is, on the interior of the building, maybe tell the story of the history of the helicopter, how it was invented in this community, and work with the Historic Commission, to find great photographs that could be enlarged, so they get everybody in touch with the history of the place. So that would be one approach to doing that. And then, you know, on the outside of the building, it's really aimed at fitting in and with Sutton Avenue to try and where the school had been and that side of the street didn't get the same kind of treatment that a lot of the other streets in the neighborhood got. We'll be fixing that with the small houses, and we see those houses as being great places for young families.
We studied some of the architecture that exists around Stratford, and you know, I think you know, Bruce and Sealand done a great job at keeping that context. You know, Bruce, you know, designed many of the buildings in South Norwalk, and if you're familiar with South Norwalk, I think the Historic Commission has done a fantastic job at keeping that town a certain feel, and, you know, half those buildings are new that Bruce designed, so, you know, that's the goal here.
And our process is, to directly answer your question, our process is to find compelling stories. We work with you, your local historians, to find a compelling story to latch on to.
You put a helipad there, Bruce?
So, based upon what experience or market research have you arrived at the size of the building or the number of units? And have you considered including any deed-restricted units into this unit count?
So in terms of the size of the project, I mean, really, there is a certain size where a building becomes, you know, less efficient. You know, the larger the project generally is, you know, more efficient. We've tried to design a building that I think scale-wise fits, you know, and really, again, the goal, you know, and we focused on it, you know, looking at the RFP as green space, you know, although it wasn't said, you know, we felt that we needed to keep the scale down on Sutton Avenue. I mean, we could have, you know, we could have designed 40 townhomes along Sutton Avenue, but that was not, you know, we didn't think that would be respectful. So, you know, once we kind of looked at that and looked at the existing zoning, really that's where we ended up. You know, and we've not considered any deed restricted units, although, you know, like we talked about, you know, the targeted demographic really falls within that 80% of AMI. So, you know, although it's not, you know, dedicated, you know, I think it'll be open to a large percent of the people living.
We also focused on the subterranean parking.
Yep.
And, you know, I think Bruce and Seelan did an excellent job at creating a very sensitive design approach to the site, especially along Sutton Avenue.
Would you be open to putting a deed restriction on the 80% AMI?
So it's all a reflection of, you know, there's a number of factors and assumptions that go in. So it's something we can look at, you know, within this plan as you see it. That was not contemplated, but if that's something that's important, that's something we can discuss, and we'll have to look at how that, you know, impacts something else.
And just me, on the size of the building, the TOD has a bedroom restriction. That was part of the calculation to see how many units we could get.
Okay, so you've touched on this as well a little bit, but maybe you could select kind of one project you've done most recently that might be closest to scale of this type of project, preferably probably a TOD project of some sort, but I don't know if that's to Bruce, who takes that question, but.
We just completed a project in Fairfield. It's called the Anchorage at 333 Conquest Street. It is similar in
It's similar in style. It's smaller, 90 units, but it's very similar in style.
yeah, so the look of the architecture could be seen there. It's a little smaller than this.
So it's 19, so how about Bruce, if you had to pick one that was, you know, maybe stylistically wasn't the same, but maybe scale-wise, you know, this is 62 units, so it's 150, 200 units, something like that?
So there's two projects in South Norwalk, one at 1 Chestnut Street that's about a month away from being fully complete, and one at 230 East Avenue. It's called Brim and Crown, and also a project we just finished the first phase of in New Haven, but has a spectacular amenity space that's when I say it's spectacular, it's because it's fully utilized. People are just taking it, the residents are fully taking advantage of it, and when new prospective residents walk in, one of the first things we've heard from the leasing agents that they say is, wow, this is the kind of place where I'd like to live. And
That's the
that's Audubon, the Audubon project in New Haven.
So for your notes, 230 East Avenue, Brim and Crown is at the East Norwalk train station, literally. The one Chestnut, which is called the platform, is at the South Norwalk station, train station, literally right outside. And the Anchorage in Fairfield is very similar to this. It's a walking distance to a train station that falls within Fairfield's TOD.
Great, thank you.
You
Yeah.
also mentioned about New Haven's gun factory
Yeah,
history.
that-
Is that Audubon or
No,
something?
that's Corsair.
Uh-huh.
It's another project in New Haven,
Where
which
is
would
it?
also be, worthy of.
That's 1042 State Street.
Well, we'll
New
remember
Haven.
that name, Corsair.
That's, when we're happy to you through those two projects in New Haven, that's been particularly well received by the community. We're actually looking at phase 2 across the street, much smaller, 70 units. But it seems to be sailing through approvals because of how well phase 1 was reviewed.
Can you give us the breakdown of your parking analysis, how many spaces per unit and so on, how you come up with that?
Yeah, I've got the notes here. So we've got 228 spaces, of which I said 22 for Board of Ed. According to our calculations, we require 175 spaces. And that's
Based on what?
Based on the assumption of 1 per 1 bed, 1.25 for 2 bed, and 1.5 per each of the homes. So that's on page A0.30 of our documentation.
Is there any reason you chose not to have, I know you have the parallel parking on Sutton.
I don't believe we counted that, just for the record.
Okay, you did count that, right?
Did not count that.
Oh, cause I had, you had 198 cars underground.
198 underground, 30 above, but 22 again for Board of Ed, and
Right.
8 were for visitors.
Okay, gotcha. And the parallel parking in front of the single family?
Looks like we have 10 there, right?
We have 8 here.
And
22
10
here.
on the,
Oh.
on Sutton, right?
Yeah.
10? Oh, I'm sorry, more.
More than 9, 10, 11, but 12, 13, but again, not counted.
Right, so were you thinking of those to be the spaces utilized by the houses? So if I buy a house, where do I park?
So,
A rent house, I'm
I
sorry.
mean, this is on your property at that point. It's a public street. Those are outside of our property lines. So we have to decide with you how they're utilized, how they're marked for whom. Or we can comfortably park our community on our site, the numbers we've given you.
So, just if someone rents one of those 4 homes, where do they park?
They could potentially park, if we decide, together, they could have a space or 2 on the street. But the building's designed so they can park in the building and walk through these rear entrances into their units.
They'd have to come up through the apartment house.
To the garage, into the amenity, and into the.
Was there any
Or
thought
lot.
given to, park on site? In other words, the scale of them looked pretty, based on the aerial, the scale looks pretty similar to the houses across the street. Was there any thought of having their own private driveway and say garage?
So we did think about that, but we want to limit the curb cuts, like we said.
You wanna know?
Limit the curb cuts.
Okay.
So you wouldn't want to be a series of curb cuts along Sutton. It's a nice urban planning idea to have a row of parking between the sidewalk and the street.
Mhm. And those ratios that you just gave, the 1 per 1 bed, 1.25, 1.5, does that get you to the 198 or the 208?
It gets us to less than, it gets to the 170, it gets us to less than we provided.
Okay. Okay, because the reason I'm asking is because at the moment, there's no allocation, with the exception of the 20 visitors for BOE, there's no staff for the BOE. The intent was to have the staff parking underground, so they would have to come up, somewhere in the corner of the end of the building to get to work, so to speak, right? So we have a
Oh, we
Board of
didn't realize
Education.
that.
We didn't
Yeah.
How many spaces are you looking for there?
So that we
I
were
don't
told,
think
and this is also a high level to be worked out with you folks, if you were to proceed, so the idea was that the superintendent at the time, the mayor, felt that 20 spaces for visiting, because they had a lot of activity during the day. And then the other, I think it was 50 or so for the staffing. in the building.
Oh, wow.
So it's a number,
Was it
so
50?
I don't want it to be forgotten, because it has a big impact on what you're trying to do here. And that's why I was asking about possibly parking for the residences being their own individual parking to get more spaces to the other allocations.
So, it's the direct answer to your question is, those numbers I just gave you work out to 175,
Right.
where we have 198 just in the basement.
Okay,
But those are based on your regs and not on Scott's and Damien's market requirements.
okay,
Right, so,
okay.
we should look at all, we should tell us how many needs.
Yeah, I didn't, in our questions, we had asked how many spaces, and, we only thought that there was the 100 or so spaces, and realized that there was extra, so.
We, in the RP, we had, the allocation of around parking would be, what do you need for the residents? What we need for the BOE, and then public, right? Because we're TOD, the idea is that possibly this could be shared for public, and also, hopefully, you know, not hopefully, I think, truly believe this is gonna energize that whole downtown area. And when it does, people might have a spot to go park, because as we know, the parking on the street is limited. Even with our complete streets projects that we're doing, we still have limited parking. I know this is a big ask, so, and I understand that, but we're, just something to think about as we start rolling along, and, you know, the parking is a big issue.
On the site, this is a zone that we could easily pick up additional, spaces in to meet that requirement.
Well, I was also, looking at the design and, thinking that maybe the emergency vehicle access would need an alternate exit or something, besides the primary entrance and exit.
So,
Yeah, but that would be
with our experience with the village,
Mhm.
and we have to go through this with your fire department, we allowed for a lane that
Okay.
would go all the way around,
All the way,
all the
okay.
way around.
With the same, with turning radius,
With the
that's your biggest truck, fire truck.
That was their requirement then, so.
Yeah, I know they would ask
Yeah,
for
so we
this.
So we
Yeah.
put it in there,
Yeah.
just in case.
So for the next question, you really kind of have answered it. I was gonna ask the allocation of parking spaces for residents, for only public, but we've gone through that, so.
Oh,
move on
I'm
to
sorry,
the next.
I didn't mean to steal your thunder.
Your next.
So as we go through design, I mean, we're
Yeah.
happy
Go through
to
it.
relook at it with a different lens, if we better understood, now we do, what, your ask is.
Yeah, good, good. So this kind of leads into the next one, we've already talked about this, but just to make sure we understand. So the tax abatement is a tax abatement, but it's also the way you're anticipating the town to participate in a financial obligation of the garage, right? So you're allocating I think it was 6.6 or 6.5 million towards the construction of the parking garage.
Correct.
So is that the parking garage in totality, or is the parking garage 10 million, 4 million you gotta do anyway because of residences, and the other 6 is for the town, or, so how did you
So,
come
yeah,
about?
so, I mean, if there wasn't a requirement to build below grade, parking, we would have built surface parking,
Right.
which is relatively inexpensive.
Right.
So that 6.5 million really is the cost of building the below grade garage
Okay, in totality,
in
so
totality.
for the residents and the public and for BOE, all that?
Yeah, and again, we didn't allocate, this plan doesn't have any spaces within the underground garage allocated to the
Right.
public, but again, it was more, we thought that the ask was to build below grade parking so that we had more surface, green space above.
No doubt.
So that was what we,
No doubt, and I think you've done a wonderful job, I mean,
Yeah.
I think you've succeeded. And I understand you kept the parking garage below the podium because of all the economical, I get all that. So, but as Bruce pointed out, along that, I guess that's the south side there, underneath the BOE parking could be another possible spot for maybe dedicated BOE parking off the main garage, right? So if you came through the resident garage, that could be a 2-story parking spot, again, below. So that could be very dedicated to the BOE, and then all the residents parking would be possible.
I'm sure there's a way we can
Okay.
figure it out.
Okay,
Yeah.
and that might adjust the financing, if I understand correctly?
I really don't know in terms of cost, and that's a fair question for Steve.
Okay.
I don't know the answer to that, but that's something we can look at.
Okay, fair enough. Thank you.
So can I jump on that, George, one thing, cause I thought I heard something earlier in your presentation, I wanna clarify, and that's that, I believe you talked about a purchase price of $750,000, but did I hear you say that 500 of that was to be allocated to the town, then we're taking 500 of that purchase price and paying for the creation of the public park?
So.
Did I hear that right?
Yeah, so what we've assumed is that right? 500 of that 750 would be allocated towards the streetscape and the public park.
Alright, so, I mean, that's an important little
Sure,
piece, right?
of course,
Because
yes.
So you're not suggesting the town gets 750, and then within your construction cost, you're paying for all that?
Correct.
Okay,
It's
so
not
really net
included in our.
250,
Correct,
really, and then,
correct.
okay.
And it's
So
not,
make sure everyone is clear about what.
Yeah, no, it should be in the RF, in our
Yeah,
proposal,
there's-
it's in our clearly.
underneath the source and uses, there's a footnote.
Yep.
That says it, and I think it's even in, our LOI. But yes, I mean, that's correct.
Okay.
We would dedicate that money solely for the public space.
So you went into this in some detail, but if you can expand a little bit more on what the projections of rent and expenses are based on.
Sure, so, we do extensive market studies, which we're happy to share. But we looked at, all of the multifamily communities, within Stratford, Milford, we even looked, at, Norwalk, we own Shelton. And, really, the way we look at, comparable buildings, in a perfect world, there'd be a brand new building directly next door to this with the same amenities we're gonna build, and then I can point to that, and it generally doesn't work out that way, right? So, we look at what benefits other communities have, does it have, is it, a school district that people wanna be in the town, is it, close to transportation, and then we kind of plus and minus everything. And we look at, unit sizes too. We're not just taking a per square foot, we stack everything up by, by unit type, by size, by price per foot, nominal price. And then we also look at incomes in the area, and we also look at the amenities and who's got what. There's a number of buildings that, might have comparable size units in a comparable location, but doesn't have the amenities. And, we think we'll exceed that. We also look at age, that's another factor, and finish. And then, that's how we project our income. And like I said, we're coming to an average, of about $2,000 a month. And again, that's blended, weighted average, right? And I don't have it in front of me, but, in our RFP submission, we break down, what the actual rents are by unit type. And then in terms of, the expenses, really, we own 5,000 apartments across the eastern half of the US. We've got including Fairfield County, so we've got a very good handle on operating expenses for this size site. Controllable operating expenses, right? And then for the non-controllables being insurance, we actually spoke to our insurance broker, where insurance rates are running. We know insurance rates have gone high, so we wanted to make sure that we're not missing on that projection. And the real estate taxes were phased in as defined in the pilot schedule.
You talked pretty extensively about this early on in your presentation, but I'll ask you to maybe elaborate a little bit more. Can you talk about your financial stacking for the project, and does it include any public funding? I think you mentioned that now, but you're obviously looking for that payment, so maybe just elaborate a little.
Yeah, so on the source and uses, it did not contemplate any public financing other than the pilot schedule. So if there is public money available, we're happy to explore it, but that's not something we contemplated.
I think you already explained to us about 952 East Broadway. You said you would have a community arts center there. I don't have much to ask about that question.
Yeah, I think you were
although I
pretty
wrote it.
clear on
Yeah.
that, and gave us a good idea of what you're planning for the next phase.
We can
for
go
that
too
building.
deep into that, because the RFP specifically, we asked that question, and that's what we kind of, it's something that's what we were thinking of, but we didn't go too deep into it, because that wasn't, what was.
No, but we would be very happy to obviously speak with the community, speak with the town on that, explore that with SHPO again, and revitalize that historic building into something very special for the community.
Is that part of the 750 purchase cost?
No.
No,
We haven't allocated any dollars for that.
zero for that right now.
Just an
Yeah,
idea.
that was just an idea for phase 2.
So the next question you already answered, I was gonna ask was, but are you looking at long-term ownership, and you've explained that, so I can move on to, George.
So, Tio Diaz, you know Bruce, because you do a great job on it in regards to mixed use, right? Retail, office, residential. You chose none of that. Can you tell us why?
Sure. So, you know, the street, Sutton doesn't really lend itself to any sort of retail. We felt it was really a residential street in nature. And the street doesn't, you know, the project doesn't really have much frontage on any sort of high traffic areas. And retail being, you know, kind of an asset class that's a little bit in flux. You know, if this was, you know, on a different street and very prominent, we definitely would have factored in retail. But just, we felt that this project lends itself to, you know, really solely multifamily.
And I think more, another aspect of this project, is to really reinforce the existing retail in the neighborhood and get those businesses, get the restaurants, busier than they might be now, and maybe orient them a little bit more towards, you know, there's a few tired, places in that neighborhood that could benefit from having, you know, this new population, you know, right there and taking advantage of all of the benefits of TOD. So we really saw this as augmenting the existing retail.
That's a great point. I mean, retail generally follows you know, the residents, right? So, you know, I didn't bring that up, but that's a great point, that we think this will be the catalyst for a lot of new restaurants and service type of retail that's just, you know.
This is a little slightly off topic, but one I've been wondering, maybe you can comment on, and I know I think I heard you say that you're open to kind of looking at the particular some designs, and, you know, my head does go to kind of the overall design of things. That's kind of my thing, but, so, you know, part of getting this approved would be, you know, the support of this board and then the council, but it's also gonna be, you know, the neighborhood and the people who live there, and whether they're gonna come out, you know, in favor of this or against this, and so you intentionally brought all the residents, you know, 100 and however many units it is, you know, all the way down to the end of Sutton Place to get them to enter the building. And I'm wondering if there was any thought about, should that entrance be up at the other end, simply because you may get, we all may get pushback from the residents of that street, because you've brought all that kind of traffic. They're gonna perceive it as all this traffic, morning and night, when people are leaving work. If, granted, maybe some are walking to the train, but we all know there's still gonna be it's gonna create some more vehicular traffic. So is that something that's open, you know, for your thoughts, or is you guys have thought it through, is the way you feel it has to be?
Bruce, you want to address that?
Well, there is the access road off, from the downtown district, there through. I mean, there are other opportunities for providing that entrance that we could explore. I think that our experience is that even with projects of this size, the daily in and out of cars is not such that there'll be any traffic jams. The street will get livelier than it currently is. Right now, it's just, you know, an extremely quiet dead-end street. But so that being said, there are other, you know, we could look at accessing the garage from a different point.
I think it's safe to say that whatever it is will be a lot less than what it was when the school's there, right?
Okay, thank you.
But we also will plan on having a traffic consultant, you know, should we get selected, you know, immediately on our team, someone we've worked with before on the village that we can bring in, and explore that.
And bottom line, you're open to possibly modifying that.
Absolutely, we're open to have discussions.
Any more questions? Mary Jean?
I'm good.
Jamie?
I'm good.
Patrick?
I'm good.
I have none. Do you folks have any questions of us?
I mean, you know, anything, any feedback on the project, any concerns that, you know, you think it's worthwhile? You know, unfortunately, this is an RFP
process, right? And we've put our best foot forward, but, it's a fluid conversation, and we would like it to be a fluid conversation. So, we'd hate to have our project disqualified because of something that someone wanted that maybe wasn't communicated. So, is there anything within the project that is a concern that you want us to relook at? We're happy to go back and.
So what we're gonna do is we're gonna be deliberating after the interviews. And most likely, I'm gonna say shortlist to a couple of developers. And at that shortlist, then we'd like to share those, collective understandings. And, Jamie just sort of put one out there just to test the water here a little bit, because that is gonna be a concern. So to answer your question, the successful developers will have a chance to go back and revisit it, if they want to, or if they don't want to, right?
Sure.
We went through this before, just as an example, when we had shortlisted the two, and one just adamantly said that, no, this is it, we're done. And so, okay, we respect that, we understand that, so hopefully you'll have a chance to possibly revisit this with any questions or comments. Overall, myself personally, I think we did a great job. I think there's room for improvement on everybody's side, and I think we're in the right direction, so. We certainly appreciate the time and you overruling with a long number of people.
Thank you for your time, really appreciate it.
Thank you very much.
Great presentation.